When Andrew Farley was 19, he reached a breaking point, doing everything his church and school told him to do, yet he felt completely empty. His religious resume was spotless. He studied his Bible constantly, shared his faith with everyone, and lived a blameless life. But inside, he felt he was failing a test he didn't understand. This feeling isn't rare. Research shows that 81% of Christians believe their faith is primarily about obeying the rules written in the Bible. Under that system, your standing with God is a moving target. You feel in fellowship when you succeed, but the moment you struggle with a thought or behavior, you believe that connection is severed. For millions, faith has become a performance treadmill, a cycle of trying to stay in God's good graces through sheer effort. Farley eventually turned away from emotional pleading and toward his professional training to find a way out. He was a professor of applied linguistics, teaching the mechanics of language at institutions like the University of Notre Dame and Texas Tech. He began analyzing the Bible's Greek text, looking for who was being addressed and when. He realized many of the rules he struggled to keep were given by Jesus before the cross, specifically to show his audience that their self-righteousness was a dead end. By treating these impossible standards as daily requirements for a modern Christian, Farley concluded that the church had allowed a parasite to take hold, a system where human effort is mistakenly injected into a message of finished work. To kill that parasite, Farley proposes a total separation of history, a move into what he calls the New Covenant. This timeline represents his core thesis. To the left of the cross, you have a system of law where humans promise to obey God to stay clean. In this era, Jesus raised the bar so high, demanding his followers be as perfect as God, that no one could reach it. To the right of the cross, the system changes entirely. Farley argues the death of Jesus functioned like the execution of a will, enacting a new era where sins are no longer counted against the believer, and the debt of the law is canceled once and for all. This requires a philosophy of Jesus plus nothing, believing that the work of salvation is so complete that adding your own religious rules actually insults the sacrifice. In this view, trying to use the old rules to stay close to God is like putting training wheels on a high-performance sports car. The most controversial part of this theology rests on a single word that Farley claims was botched in modern translations. Popular versions, like the 1984 NIV, translated the Greek word sarx as sinful nature. But Farley argues the word actually means flesh, referring to external habits and worldly thinking, not a person's actual identity. If the believer doesn't have a sinful nature, then what remains is the new creation described in the epistles. Since God does not create a righteous spirit that is also partially stained, Farley concludes the believer's core identity, their spiritual hardware, is brand new and flawless. The struggle we feel isn't a bad nature fighting a good nature. It's perfect new hardware trying to run old, buggy software, habits of the flesh that were programmed by the world before we were changed. This means that constant confession is unnecessary. If your hardware is flawless and you are a new creation, you don't need to beg for forgiveness to get close to God again. You are already there. By fixing this one translation, Farley dismantles the entire machinery of religious guilt, telling believers they are clean and acceptable by default. Not everyone finds this message liberating. Theological critics has labeled this hyper-grace, warning that it removes the very things that keep people in line. Traditionalists argue that if you stop teaching daily repentance and confession, you destroy the process of growing in faith and the reality of dealing with sin. They fear that telling a person their nature is flawless will lead to moral laziness, giving people a license to live however they want, because they believe they are already perfect in God's eyes. This sets up a fundamental divide, a faith built on the protective guardrails of religious accountability versus a faith that trusts a brand new nature to produce good results. Ultimately, it asks which force is more powerful, the pressure of rules to keep us from doing wrong, or the belief that we are already loved and made new, which changes what we want to do in the first place.